Good evening. I'm Catherine Futter. I'm the Helen Jane and R. Hugh Pat Ullman, Ullman Senior Curator of Architecture, Design, and Decorative Arts. And welcome to, did I forget something?
No, your mic is still not right. It's sort of distorted.
Okay. Is that okay? Better? No? I sound like I'm in a can? Are you sure that's not my New York nasal accent? Is that better? No? Oy, oy. There's shaking heads up there.
We can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. I can do it without one really easily. Okay. So thank you for coming this evening for our conversation with Tom Price, the artist of the exhibition Presence and Absence, which will be open to you after our talk this evening in the project space, Gallery L8. So please go down to the space after the exhibition. We're showing you an installation shot, just shot with a camera. We'll have much more beautiful images soon.
Thanks.
But it gives you an idea of some of the works that are in the exhibition. So we thought we'd start with the idea of what the topic is of, or the theme is of the exhibition, Presence and Absence. So Tom, would you like to tell us a little bit about how you came to that theme?
Yeah, I was initially kind of interested in the idea of, well, I think it was kind of looking at alternative universes or parallel universes and how you might have something that's, or matter and antimatter and things that might collide and subtract one thing from another. And I was interested in how forms can define and be defined by each other. And so, yeah, I was looking at this in various different ways and started looking at different materials to achieve this. And yeah, I guess one of the ways was sort of jumping around the sort of stages of the process, but somewhere along the way I was looking at Pompeii, the body cast in Pompeii.
Yeah,
and
you can have it.
Yeah.
I'll cede control.
You haven't taught me how to use this. So yeah, at some point I was interested in the body cast in Pompeii. It relates in some way to my work because a lot of what I produce is made in molds, and I find the process of mold making and casting from molds quite fascinating. Sometimes the molds end up being much more interesting than what you end up casting inside it. And looking at the body cast in Pompeii purely from a dispassionate point of view, I found it really fascinating the way that they're very emotive and very poignant. That what we're looking at is essentially a mold, and wondering at the void inside and what sort of what created the mold. And so there was an interesting sort of paradox with these the archaeologists faced when they filled some of the molds with resin to reveal the shape of the person who was inside. But in order to do that, they needed to break the mold, and then you've lost something of huge historical significance. But at the same time, that cast from the inside is really fascinating, and I was always undecided as to which was the more sort of poignant work.
So one of the things that you told me about this pair was the intersection of those two figures.
Yeah.
The fact that they were, so that was something that you explored. And this is one of the casts, the resin casts from the Pompeii molds, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that I wanted to explore the concept of the notion of presence and absence. Catherine came over to visit my studio in London a while ago, and we were discussing how we might approach the exhibition. And I was talking about all these ideas I was having and mentioned presence and absence, and we landed on that as the title for the exhibition. And I don't know whether to go into this too much at this point about how we originally started off on a different track with this about I was interested in how the forms could be, one human form could be subtracted from another, and this sort of interrelationship between two bodies and how they could define and support each other. But it started being a bit, when we started making them, it was a bit uninteresting formally. And so within all my work, the material is always really important, and I knew that for these pieces, I wanted to use a material that was very relevant, that was pertinent to the concept. And that's when I started thinking about carbon being the sort of fundamental element of all life in the universe. And that led me on to looking at coal as one of the purest forms of carbon. And then coal brought with it a whole host of other issues, interesting kind of issues to do with the environment and our contemporary way of life, and how we rely on it but are also threatened by it. So in itself, it's sort of posing this kind of big issue of absence and presence within itself. So yeah, so do you want to move on?
You started with the materials, and that's something that you often do, or actually you always do, is start with finding the most appropriate materials for your ideas and developing them. So here we see the three elements that you've worked with.
Yeah, I mean, these are three experiments. These were three actually totally disassociated experiments that we've been doing in the studio. And then one day, we just decided to put them all on the table and realized there was a really beautiful relationship between the three of them. So I wanted to explore that a little bit more and see what could be drawn out of it. I should probably explain. Well, there's a lump of bronze, which is a bit of an odd object, and then this sort of blue resin piece, and then the thing at the back is actually burnt plywood.
So one of the things in talking to Tom over the last couple of years about his projects is, and I think it's sort of, we had a conversation with a reporter the other day, is his willingness to take risks and let chance be sometimes his guide of how the work is going to develop. You certainly are not adverse to failure, and
I actively encourage it.
And I think it was the fact that you said that you start from a place of relative ignorance, not complete ignorance, but relative
Not complete ignorance.
So I guess sort of talking about how chance, one of the things he also said was that with chance, it allows him to go back to a work of art repeatedly, something he's made, and really see new things in it. So I think that's what he also hopes visitors will see, that they're constantly seeing new textures, new feelings, new interests in it.
Yeah, and I mean, chance was a real, using chance and directly as a tool was a real breakthrough for me, because my training is in sculpture but also in design, and I'd sort of gone more down the route of design for quite a while, and I was getting very frustrated with just the conventional approach to design of drawing on a computer or on a piece of paper, and then voila, you have your thing. And so introducing the entropy into that system, it just opened up a whole lot of, I sort of gave a bit of authorship of the whole process to this element of chance. And then it keeps it really fresh for me, because I'm always surprised by the results. Sometimes disappointed. I have a lot of failures. But then I think there's, it's this thing about the ignorance or the relative ignorance is quite an interesting thing, because whenever we're in the studio and we start on a new project, and we're working with a brand new material, and there's so much to learn from it. But if you're too much of an expert from the beginning, you just want to get the perfect results from it. If you don't know much about how it works, you have much more fun playing around with it and coming up with really bizarre results. Some of the results are really, you know, just have no interest at all. But occasionally you find something that goes, you just go, wow, that's amazing. And then we sort of chase after that and try and work out how that's happening, why it's happening, and how can we make it happen again. So then it goes from this stage of ignorance to relative expertise. So these are the objects again. I'm not sure what put them in there now.
So I got to know Tom's work through a series that he did called Meltdown Series, and there's a chair, and he'll show a picture of it in a couple of minutes. But I really reacted to this use of seemingly everyday materials in very unexpected ways, how a ball of rope could turn into a really beautiful piece of sculpture and a functional object. And I guess we were sort of joking around this afternoon about why rope? Why rope, Tom?
Oh, is that the question? This whole project started with rope, and it was, again, coming back to this idea of working with material, although rope isn't a particularly foreign and unfamiliar material. I was interested in how you take plastic rope and you just melt one end of it to stop it fraying, and it transforms it from this kind of flexible, slightly rough, but also soft material to something that's hard and molded and smooth. And so I wanted to see how far that could be taken. And after several attempts, I arrived at this mold. And the shape of the chair is loosely based on an Eames chair. And the decision for that was mostly that I didn't want the focus to be on the design of the chair itself, but instead on the material and what it's doing when it's melted. So I wanted a very familiar and proven and tested form. So this was the process. That starts off with a ball of rope. It's wound around a beach ball, which is then punctured and withdrawn, so it leaves a cavity inside. And then that enables me to create a dip in the surface. And then it's placed on top of the metal former, which is heated from inside and from underneath with lots of heat guns. It's a really, really low-tech gadget that took ages. It took me 9 months to get to the point where I could melt this ball of rope. And it's got a bit of my grandmother's old oven. Like I took an old oven element and the control, and it's still hanging down from the wires because I don't dare touch it because it's working perfectly now. And so and then it just gradually melts over the metal surface, and then as it cools, it sets into the shape of the chair. And then various different. This is several of those chairs woven together. This was made for a commission in Korea. And then it was applied to various other materials. So this is made out of polypropylene pipe, which is really common in the UK, but doesn't seem to exist anywhere else in the world. And I know this because I've been asked to make these pieces in other places. We were invited out to China, and they ended up having to manufacture the tube specially, whereas you can just pick this up in most hardware stores. And I've tried to find it here in the US as well. And PVC is very common. So it's one of the interesting things when you're a maker, when you're an artist, how much your environment influences what you can and can't make, and how it sort of will direct you in one way or another. So what I have at my disposal really influences and informs what I will go on to make. So this is the same sort of thing in black. And this is polypropylene sheet. Again, with most of these works, people are very dubious about how functional they are. But with all these chairs, I make them so that they are actually very functional and can completely support the weight of a person, even though these look completely improbable. This is made from zip ties. There's about 10,000 zip ties in there. So that's pretty labor intensive. And this was actually, the original one was made from pink plastic bags, polythene bags. And we completely exhausted the supply. There's a supplier really close to my old studio who just had this random batch of bright pink plastic bags. And when I went in and saw them, I loved the color. And so we bought the whole lot up and made this chair. And then when we came to make the second one, we went back to him and said, have you got any more of those bags? And he's like, nope. Just his supply, and we went for a few months. He was trying to contact his supplier, and I kept on going back and said, have you got them back yet? No. So in the end, I had to get it, to make the next chair, I had to get it manufactured, and we amazingly got exactly the same color, but on a roll. And then, so this is another version of the chair that's in the collection here, made from PVC hose. I'm in danger of talking too much about all this, aren't I?
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. Well, I'll just briefly. This was one of the sort of best examples of of the surprise of chance. And I was actually trying to melt this chair completely clear, but I knew it was prone to burning. But it wasn't until it was fully melted and came off that I saw that surface, and it was a real shock initially. But then I realized that the surface itself is really fascinating because although it looks like charcoal and really brittle, it's actually very flexible, and it turned out to be one of the most comfortable chairs I've made. And this is made with polyester fleece, so lots of jumpers. And this is made with woven plastic rugs. That was a one-shot deal. I found these rugs in a recycle center, and they had 10 of them. I have no idea where they came from, and I had one chance to melt them into the chair, and it worked. But I've not been able to make another one since because I have no idea where they came from. And this is made with. This was a commission by a Chinese gallery actually. They wanted something that reflected their East-West philosophy. So they wanted one table that was of Socrates, and another one was of Confucius. And so we had them displayed in the gallery like this with a sort of convex mirror, so you could see them from a higher angle. And then this was directly cast from the plastic pipe. I showed an image before of a black plastic tube chair, and this was made cast directly from that. So instead of doing a lost wax casting, this was a lost plastic casting. And so you're actually using the properties of the plastic to aid the casting process. So I find this interesting to move it on a step further. Mm-hmm. And it has its own interesting qualities about it. And then these are some details. Do you want to move on to the next subject?
No, I think you can talk about how, beginning to sort of, there are different levels to approach your work. And so there's the big object, the design of it, the overall impact, and then how further exploration brings you into start looking at different chants or different details of it. And so that this kind of thing, by showing some details of your earlier work and then linking it later on to the exhibition.
Yeah. So for me, these are the things that really interest me, is looking really in detail at what the material's doing. And with this chair, which is the close-up of the PVC hose chair, each time it melts, it does something different, and it's something to do with the chemical mix in the raw material. But yeah, this is the part that I find really fascinating. And this is a white rope chair, and this was completely unexpected. These really beautiful little sort of coral-like or crustacean-like forms that revealed themselves. And then this was taking that, working with the polypropylene pipe a step further. This was made for an exhibition I did in Industry Gallery in Washington, D.C. And there were 8 trees, and the blossom or foliage is made from thousands of cut sections of pipe. And I'd made a large hot plate that was used to melt them on one side, so it forms this flexible sheet that can be manipulated and twisted and forms this sort of canopy. So it has a really nice effect with the light coming through. And then this is a commission for Bloomberg in London, and it's for to go in 4 glass meeting rooms. So there are 4 rooms that sort of intersect, but are divided by glass walls. And this tree, this is how the offices looked before. And it struck me as really bizarre to have completely clear glass meeting rooms, but then have individual tables and chairs and everyone pretending they're not really kind of noticing the person in the next room. So I wanted to do something that would unite all of the rooms so that when you're looking from the outside, it looks like they're all continuous. And so it was like a round table that was obviously cut into 4. And then we had this crazy task of making this tree and then cutting that into 4 sections and sticking it onto the glass, which was quite a challenge. And then the tables had these inlay. We took apart the old Bloomberg monitors and used some of the lenses from inside the monitors to create this sort of holographic effect. So these were the sections of the blossom that were inside these sort of light boxes. And then, so each table has about 9 or 10 light boxes. So we're on to the next section. Shall I keep on going?
Yes, you're doing great.
I think the reason I chose this image was because although this model was developed slightly further down the line, it reminded me of why I had wanted to start working with resin in the first place. I was in Hong Kong. My wife was born there, so we go back from time to time. And we were exploring this amazing fishing village where all the houses are made in aluminium. And it's a really bizarre place. But just looking through down one alleyway, there was this amazing aluminium house and a blue window. And I just really loved that combination of colors. And it set me off thinking about encasing the blue resin in aluminium. And through the experiments, we started looking at the way that light interacts with resin. And initially, we were working with resin using it in a very pure way, using it in the way it's meant to be used, to try and get really pure casts and drawing out sort of nice, clean, interesting surfaces. But as the experiments went on, we kind of realized there was much more interest that could be drawn out by manipulating the actual properties of the resin itself. So that led us onto this sort of investigation into how far the resin could be pushed. So yeah, we initially had really great, really exciting results. We'd bought in the first batch of resin, it came with a catalyst that we realized if we just up to the percentages, we get amazing sort of fractures and these things all happening inside. And then when that ran out, we bought the next batch, and we couldn't get it to do the same thing. And we couldn't work out why it was doing that. And so we buying in different resins from different suppliers, different catalysts, and combining them and trying all these different things, and nothing was working. And fortuitously, when I came to visit Kansas City last time.
In October.
Yeah, I met with a friend of Catherine's, Tony Giordano, who was a formulator in resin, and said, if you ever need any help, just give me a call. Here's my contact details. So when we hit this massive stumbling block, it set us back 2 months, this whole thing, trying to get the thing to work again. And so he was saying, oh, you could try this, you could try a bit of that. And so I was upstairs in the office, sort of collecting all this information. And Ollie, who works with me, was down in the studio, busily mixing up all these sort of chemical things in his big chemical suit, and coming up with a thing and saying, oh, we've nearly got it. And then we're going downstairs and then trying a bit more. And so eventually we got it all to work. And yeah, this was the first kind of really large scale one that we tried, and that was like the point where we said, yes, this is going to work. We can really achieve something, well, spectacular for us. Right? We love the results of that.
And this one is on view down in the galleries.
Yeah. So, shall I go on to? Shall I just carry on? Okay.
You don't really need me, which is great.
Yeah. So, what you don't see in those resin pieces is, I mean, this is a bit like a magician revealing his tricks at the moment. But I thought it deserved a bit of attention because there's a lot of work that goes into creating the internal spaces in them, and this is all. Ollie would be busy down in the workshop, sort of polishing up, casting and polishing up all these shapes, and then making these crazy sculptures with tar. This is all tar, sort of piled on top of the crystals, and they're beautiful sculptures. You bring them up to the office, and I'd be like, wow, that's really cool. And then it just goes and gets absorbed into the big block, and then it sort of all disappears. But then the effect it creates, on a large scale is quite amazing. So I thought that deserved a bit of attention anyway. So. But yeah, so this is the process of making the big resin synthesis pieces. So yeah, it's a multi-stage mold because we can only pour certain quantities of resin at a time, and so we need to be able to get into it for each layer, get it to do the reactions, and then when it gets to a certain height, we add the next section on, and then it keeps on getting built up like that. And then eventually it comes out looking, when it first comes out of the mold, it does not look like this. It looks horrible. It's got lots of sticky resin on it that all needs to be scraped off, and then there's days of sanding and polishing, and eventually it gets to this. But this is the only time when we know what it's actually going to look like. And so this was a massive gamble, because I was convinced we were going to take the mold apart and the whole thing was just going to go psh, and be in fragments. But yeah, and then this is how it appears in the exhibition. And this is a very nice detail. So yeah,
This is not a photoshopped image. That's all just one section of synthesis.
Yeah.
It's showing you all the different effects, and all that color is from the tar.
Yeah.
Because the resin is actually colorless.
And that was a fascinating thing for me, is like how much color you get out of just these two materials. It's the colorless resin when it's poured, and then the seemingly completely black tar. And just when they interact and all the chemical process happens, it draws out all these colors, and you get these incredible pinks and greens and yellows. Like that. Okay.
You're going to talk about process of how you came with the carbon voids and some of the other techniques that you use.
Yeah. So, where did it start? Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. So for the, I do use a lot of different approaches to make the work, and I don't like to rely on any one thing in its entirety. I use computers a lot for designing things, doing layouts, and specifically for the carbon void pieces, they needed to be planned out absolutely precisely because we were intersecting shapes and they needed to meet up perfectly. And we had to make molds that would accommodate these forms. And these are models that very crudely made, but really important to be able to see the thing. It's one thing seeing it on the screen, but actually being able to hold it and look around it is a completely different thing. And so this is the molds that, well, making the molds, the thing sticking out the top is the original form made in MDF, and that was all CNC cut, so it was absolutely precise. And then silicon was poured in around it, and then this is with the mold removed so we could get the silicon off the former, and then we're left with this sort of cavity. So we had two shells like this that are used to mold the coal. then this was you'll see in the exhibition, there's one piece which is, has these aluminium slices taken out of it. And this again, the aluminium itself had to be very precisely cut and fabricated, and then sanded at exactly the right angle so that it would fit into the mold and everything would go together. And
Could you just talk for a second about so in the background there in the mold is the coal?
yes.
And what kind of coal have you been using for this project?
We've been using anthracite, and it's sourced from a company in Wales who were absolutely amazing. I don't know how we found them, but they sent us samples, all different. They do different grades of coal, and most of the coal they produce is used for water filtration, so for sewers and cleaning water. And they kept sending us samples and grades. Up until that point, we'd been buying coal from the local petrol station or gas station, and taking it back and hitting it with a hammer, and then putting it in a blender, and yeah, we had some very.
While you were here in October, he said he needed some coal, and I thought, I've seen plenty of trains go by with coal. So we tried to get some coal, and we found out that the smallest amount we could get was a train. And, and I said, but I don't even want a whole car. Could I just have part of a car? No, you need to buy the whole train. So we realized that was a little bit too much coal.
Yeah.
But at one point, we even thought of papering the gallery with coal, but we moved off that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Huh?
Charcoal has a slightly different quality, and I think also conceptually, I really like the fact that the coal is made over millions of years, and it's, in itself, it's sort of hinting at an absence, because it comes from ancient woodlands, ancient vegetation, and I just like that, that concept, rather than taking something and immediately transforming it into something. Just had a more precious quality, and it's got a beautiful. It's mineral qualities. It's got a beautiful kind of reflective shine to it. So we had some very grubby interns. We were looking like a coal mine for quite a while. And, was there anything else to talk about that? Anyway, the coal company were amazing, and ended up shipping a whole half a ton of coal to us for free. So that was very nice of them. So this is going back to the carbon bodies, not carbon bodies, the presence of absence work, which is the coal bodies. So this is what I was talking about earlier on, when I was thinking about intersecting, having a negative person, subtracting something from a positive person, and whether one could define the other, and there was something really unsatisfactory about these. I found them, it was just a bit cold. It was very difficult to see what was going on there. And then when we started introducing coal, there was something about, this was the first thing that we produced in coal. And when it came out of the mold, there was, the first time I saw it, I had a really I had a very visceral response to it. And it was, I felt quite emotional seeing it, just sitting there on my own in the office and looking at it on the table. I was quite choked by it. And so I just started to realize that the material itself could speak much more eloquently than trying to be too clever with the forms. And so that's why it took the approach of just casting the whole figures and letting the material and the qualities of the material do the talking and expressing the concepts much better. And what I was really hoping to achieve was having these really, although the figures are very broken up and disjointed, there are these areas of incredible detail where you see, especially on the female figure, she has goosebumps all over her body, and then you see the sort of wrinkles behind the elbow on this figure, and then it gets really rough and broken up, and I really like that kind of contrast. So this is the process of the female model being cast, And so it took a silicon mold of her, and then it was encased in plaster. And
You
then...
might want to talk about how you chose your models, because I think that was interesting.
It was a difficult decision. My original plan for the work was to have quite a lot of people, and at some point I would quite like to have a whole room full of different people. It was really difficult knowing that I was just going to be using 2 models, because I knew that people would really read into why that person with that person, what the relationship is between them. I think I'd already decided on the female model, because when we met her, she had this incredible frailty about her. She was very delicate, and she was very soft-spoken. So it was interesting, really, meeting them rather than just being, at a distance, seeing a photo and saying, yeah, I'll take that one. It was really interesting meeting her, and then I thought she would be an amazing person to cast in coal because she looks very brittle herself, and that would translate really well. And then at some point I was really seriously considering using an older guy, but then I thought people are going to read into all sorts of different things if I have an older guy and a younger girl. And so I needed to find sort of 2 people that were kind of compatible but kind of neutral, and I didn't want to be too prescriptive in how people read the piece. So in the end, I used models that were that I just found physically interesting, and it turned out they were both dancers, and I found that added element quite intriguing, that they work with their bodies, and that it seemed like a natural fit. So yeah, after the casting process, we end up with lots of bits and pieces that need to be pieced together. And then, yeah, they come together in forms like this. This is a shot from the gallery.
And so there are 3 states.
Yes.
There are 2 pairs of each state, or a pair of each state.
Yeah. So again, it's the idea of casting mold, of using molds. That in a way I see it as like trying to recall a memory in the way that we would take a photograph or recall something. When you're making a mold, you're repeating something. You're capturing the presence of something that was there originally, but everything is this kind of simulacrum of that that initial piece. And so the idea of having the molds, so that the forms disintegrating is kind of echoing that notion of memories fading, or things gradually returning to dust, in the same way that carbon is a very cyclical element, in that it's involved in the creation and the death of things. And the other thing about Pompeii, actually, which was quite a significant thing for me when I was thinking about the material, was that in the town of Herculaneum, which was closer in proximity to the volcano, the heat from the blast was so intense that it was described that people were instantly carbonized. So I found that really fascinating, that that in a flash something can be transformed, back into another element. So, yeah, I think that's. Then we're back to the exhibition again.
Okay. So I think now we will open it up to questions. Of course, we also can go down to the gallery and be with the work and talk about it. But if anybody has questions for Tom?
When you were melting all this stuff, I'm assuming you had a lot of fumes.
You mean for the chairs, all the melted plastic?
Wearing some kind of, mask to not...
Yeah. We I think we've got progressively more conscious of health and safety. Yeah, I always wore masks, and we got ventilation. But actually, I tend to use relatively benign materials, relatively untoxic. That's why I like using polypropylene a lot, because it's pretty non-toxic material. Thank you.
appreciate you coming out this way. And I think it's fascinating that your pieces are very freeformist in some way, and yet they're also very linear. So you have a rectangle that has all of maps inside, just doing whatever it does. And it's just sort of paradox.
Yeah, well, that actually it took us a while to realize that that's how they should be presented, because the first you'll see in the display cases, originally we were making forms that are very faceted, and then realized that that's actually a bit of a distraction, because what you want to see is just a very clear window, and the interest isn't in the external form, it's really in what's going on inside. So that's where it sort of got really pared down.
How long did it take you to do the tree and the 4 separate glass cubes?
The tree and the faucet.
The Bloomberg-
Oh, right, the
Bloomberg
Bloomberg
mission.
thing. Well, installing it was a nightmare, because we could only work weekends and evenings, and so yeah, that nearly killed us, that project. It was incredibly long hours, and when it all started going wrong, because we devised lots of really clever ways of joining the branches to the glass, and tested them in the studio, and everything worked perfectly. And then when we got there, and nothing worked anymore. The stuff wouldn't stick to the glass. Nobody knew why. We were getting all the people in the building to come and give advice, and so then we had to. Yeah, a lot of the work, a lot of what we do is trying to come up with Plan B. You know, it's like, well, why isn't this working now? It should have worked, but it's not working. So the installation itself took a long, long time. It was 2 weekends of Friday 6 o'clock till Monday morning 8 o'clock, kind of almost without any sort of sleep during that time. So 2 of those with, but then everything was made in advance in the studio. There was actually an awful lot of work that went into making the tables and the stools, and we did the flooring, we did the lighting, we did so much else. And everyone just looked straight past all that and said, "Oh, I like the tree." It's like, but, sorry?
The frustration that you refer to?
The-
You refer to something labeled as frustration. There's a close-up,
the close-up of the rope. Yeah, that was a seat of the melted rope. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things I do really like about working with Chance, is that I feel like I can't really claim authorship of everything that happens. So that's what keeps me interested in the work. Sort of not thinking I made that, or that could have been done better. It's like, it is what it is. It was created, and it feels like it's been presented. So that's. Yeah, because I often find it difficult to say, "Oh, I'm really pleased with my work. Isn't this a nice thing that I've made?" But I like being able to appreciate something that's happened accidentally. So that's why I try and encourage that as much as possible.
There was somebody in the back over there.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by your approach, what you were just talking about right there, discovery. There's a lot of schools of art. You had to learn everything first, get it absolutely right, know it from top to bottom, know how the chemicals work, the paints work and everything, and then you were allowed to be considered an artist. Right, then you could be more freeform, like Picasso or Klimt or someone like that. But I really personally love just getting in and starting to discover.
Yeah.
And not being an expert at it and letting it come to you. I mean, I love that you do that. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think there's a parallel with that, because I used to be a musician as well, and I grew up with all my friends playing music. And I think the music we were playing when we were 14, 15 was much better than when we got really good at our instruments. I think there were much more interesting things. And when everybody got really, I had a few of my friends went on to be professional musicians, and they're very rigid in what they do, So it takes a lot of that. I think it takes a lot of the fun out of it. And,
Any more?
Sorry, how confident?
He wants to know whether they're going to crumble in the gallery.
Oh, right.
For the next one.
Are you confident you can build another, or is it that difficult?
No, we've got the formula down now. So, yeah, we know what works and what doesn't work, which is it's a bit of a double-edged sword because, again, it's going back to that thing of, when you're starting out and you're playing around with things, it's quite interesting. And then when you get to know how something works, it's a bit more predictable. And we've got to find ways to make it less predictable. There's still a lot that can be played around with because, as we were making them, we realized that doing things with a mold as it was drying or trying to take the thing out too early before it had completely set created different results in the surface. So, yeah, I feel like we've got quite an expertise in, in certain aspects of this. And we actually ended up making a really fascinating and very adaptable material because it's very malleable. You can get it to behave in really interesting ways. So that's made me really excited to want to try other things as well. So yeah, it was a good discovery in the process.
So one of the things, just as attached to this, is that when Tom was working on this project, and as you saw, he made chairs and tables before, and he called me at some point and he said, "How are you going to be if these are not chairs and tables?" And I said, "That's fine, just go do your work. I'm not worried about it." So and I think even in your thinking now that some of this may end up turning into more design objects, but right now, this is the sort of first stage of something that may take him on all new kinds of routes and paths.
Yeah, sometimes the design element can be a bit of a crutch. It was certainly for me sometimes that I would think, I've got to make a chair. What material can I use? And then it's this whole thing of thinking, well, this material is doing really fascinating things, but then we make it into a table or a chair, and then somebody says, "Oh, how comfortable is this?" And then it's just immediately reduced to, how does my bum fit into this? And that's, I find that a bit disappointing sometimes. So it's quite nice to have the freedom just to say, right, let's just do whatever's going to be the most appropriate application for this material.
There was some, yep.
Since you chose two sets of the same two figures, I'd be really interested in hearing about the story as far as placement goes, especially, the two figures on in the right side, the man and the woman has so many pieces taken out of her, while the man, maybe has a few, and they're so close in proximity, and I was just interested to see what kind of stories you were maybe expecting to come out of that, or?
I really wanted to leave the interpretation as open as possible, and in some ways I've said much too much about it because I've revealed all about my interest in Pompeii and memories and the fading of things but I didn't really know how they would be placed when they came here. When I had them in the studio, there were moments when they were put to one side because we were working on something else. And just seeing them next to each other, suddenly they took on a completely different, had a completely different feeling. And so I wanted to try to recapture some of that without being too prescriptive in saying what the interpretation should be. So yeah, that's a kind of cop-out way of saying I don't want to answer your question.
So I think actually that's sort of a perfect opportunity to have an invitation to go down to the gallery to look at the work. But I think Tom did an absolutely amazing job this evening because England lost the World Cup today. And I was really worried about how his mood was going to be. So thank you, Tom, so much.